Welcome everybody, afternoon. My name is Kevin Richards. I'm the CEO of Kingston Properties Limited. And for those of you who don't know anything about our company, we're a real estate investment company right here in Jamaica. And we have been operating for the last 12 years under the tenets of a REIT, or a real estate investment trust. We have properties in Jamaica, the US, and the Cayman Islands. Now, this is probably going to be the first in a series of 4 that we're going to have, just primarily talking about real estate investing. And this was largely triggered by a lot of conversation that's been going on in the space about the future of commercial real estate. Ever since the onset of the pandemic, COVID-19, a number of the spaces in the real estate category has been affected. A number of places have been affected, primarily office spaces. So there's been a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion around what's the future of office spaces, how is this going to affect other property types. But most of those discussions have been primarily focused on larger markets, more developed economies, bigger metropolises. Very little discussion has been around, what's likely to happen in the commercial real estate space in Jamaica or in the wider Caribbean. So we decided to put together a bunch of, expert stakeholders in the field to have a conversation about, what were some of the things we were seeing happening in the commercial real estate space prior to the pandemic. Let's share some observations now that we're right in the middle of the pandemic. Well, we're still in the pandemic, and how all of this is going to affect the future of commercial real estate. What's likely to happen with office spaces in Jamaica going forward? Is there an impact for industrial properties? And we specifically limited our conversation just to those 2 subcategories: office spaces and industrial properties. Retail spaces, it's a whole other animal. It was facing its own headwinds prior to the pandemic, and that's something that we can talk about in a future discussion program. So we've assembled, as I said before, an expert panel. With me, we have Jermaine Williamson, who is a senior valuer with VM Property Services Limited. We have Stanley Beckford, who himself is a business consultant and project manager, and someone who spent many years with a large, prominent food manufacturing and distributing company. And of course, Yanni Epstein, who is the founding chairman and CEO of ITEL BPO, one of the larger players in the ICT sector here in Jamaica, and they operate regionally and they have operations globally. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to have the conversation with us.
Thank you.
Kevin.
Happy to be here.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. I know there are a number of people who've called in and sent in emails who want to participate, and we're actually not only on Zoom, but we should be on YouTube and Facebook as well. And I know lots of people have questions, so you can shoot your questions in, whether if you're on Zoom or via social media. Maybe if you send an email, we may be able to address it. But we'll take those questions at the end, towards the end of the discussion. But Jermaine, I want to start off with you because you like the rest of the panel, you bring in various perspectives. Certainly on this panel, we have people who are giving us the realtor perspective, the tenant perspective, the landlord perspective, the property manager perspective. Hopefully we'll cover all of that, but you're looking at it from 2 sides. You can look at it from the realtor perspective, the property manager, the valuer perspective. What are some of the things that you were seeing that was driving demand for space in the commercial sector for pre-pandemic?
Hi, good afternoon again, everyone. Okay, so prior to the pandemic, the market would have been classified as buoyant in the respect that there's very active demand coming from primary stakeholders, which included government entities, which have always been one of the major occupant of commercial office spaces in Jamaica. But there was a great increase in the demand for space for the BPO sector. So prior to the pandemic, it was very, especially large spaces, we find that the demand, supply was trailing behind demand, and that is what one of the reasons for the amount of developments that we have seen across Kingston specifically. We could point out a few sites which added to the existing stock of office spaces in the corporate area. So, that's pretty much.
No, most of this demand was concentrated in what I would call the urban core in terms of the office space. New Kingston tend to be pretty popular in Kingston. What were you seeing? Was there a trend also to move outside of that urban core to go on the periphery of New Kingston?
Yes, most definitely there's a trend on the outskirts, primarily along the busy thoroughfares, Constant Spring Road, Halfway Tree Road, to an extent the northern end of Hagley Park Road. But on the outskirts, there has been a lot of activities. And as I pointed out earlier, the major player being BPO, it is essential. Accessibility is essential. Yeah. So closer to the transportation hubs, we have a few major minor hubs, and then Halfway Tree being a major hub in the corporate area. It makes sense.
Right. And once the pandemic hit, have you seen any shifts? I mean, what was your original observation once the pandemic hit? Was there any change in demand? What are some of the things that people are looking for now?
Well, as it is right now, we are not in a position to say as yet, how the real impact of the pandemic. Right. We're expecting over the short term, because people will be revisiting their business model, and for the better part of the last 5 months, a lot of empty workstations would be in, a lot of these tenanted spaces. So, one would look on the operational side and see some form of savings. But as it is right now, commercial rental, it's governed by a lease agreement, which is a legal document that is for a particular period. So, if there should be any changes, to your occupancy arrangement, it must be it must be dealt with under the terms of your agreement. Right. Where I see some landlords may be running into problem is where for those leases that are tending towards the end, upon renegotiation, it may, depending on the type of business, with cost saving being a major initiative right now, given that a lot of companies that falls outside of the essential services are seeing significant cuts in their revenue. They would want to save, and you look at rent.
Right, but the cost to maintain a building hasn't changed. What is happening in terms of on the property management side? Because we now have new health and safety requirements, new protocols. Does that mean that landlords will now have to put in a lot more into their properties, and how is that affecting the cost of maintaining?
Well, in terms of maintenance, right? When you're doing up a maintenance budget, you're gonna have 3 major tickets. You have other tickets, but you have security, you have janitorial services, and electricity. Those are 3 major items in your maintenance budget, and most definitely, for the janitorial services aspect, you're going to find that there's going to be a huge increase in the in that line item, primarily because you have to now be investing in a lot of PPE, personal protective equipment. You have to be the frequency of sanitization is also has also increased, and then the operation of the building in itself, airflow. And also, your frequency in maintaining your HVAC system, your air conditioning system, that will also increase. So with these items, with these line items increasing, you're going to find that in the baseline, the final result of your maintenance budget, you're going to have some increase, and I suspect it should be a reasonable increase, a big increase.
Right. But I want to go back to something that you mentioned about what is likely to happen to those tenancies that are, about to expire soon. Is it that you expect that more people will be downsizing, or is it that rates are going to be affected? What exactly do you think is likely to happen?
All right, so there are several things at play right now. It's not just so we have remote work being a new norm, right? And as I indicated before, you'd see in a regular office a few empty workstations because people are now working from home. There, for the on the rent side, right? There is also the devaluation of the Jamaican currency, which a lot of these rentals are quoted in US dollars, and the exchange rate is based on the prevailing rate on the day. Most times BOJ is the index. So you find that what we have seen, especially over the past month, the dollar has slipped probably like $10 from 139 to 150 the last time I checked. You will the expenses for these tenants, the rental for the rental portion would have increased dramatically, so you find that in the cost cutting, people would consider, tenants would consider downsizing first and foremost, the aim is to keep the tenant, right? From the property management standpoint, you want to keep the tenant. So first, if you'd like for the tenant to be able to afford the space, to stay in the building and stay with the existing space, or even demand more. If that's not the ideal, then if they decide to downsize, that's an option. But it's best to have try as best as possible to maintain 100% occupancy and avoid going into vacancies, because that is expensive. So the landlord or the property manager must be proactive and try to engage your tenants long before the expiration of their lease, right? And understand their situation, their ability to continue paying the rent, and work with them, because it has to be, for me, I think the way through this pandemic is partnership.